Hi guys, my name is Andrew Henderson from Nomad Capitalist. Nomadcapitalist.com is our website. Happens to be the world's most visited website for people looking to set up offshore, get second passports, and become global citizens. And I want to talk to you today from Tbilisi, Georgia, about one offshore jurisdiction that I hear some folks out on the internet promoting, and that I think that while they're well-intentioned, you would be best to stay away from in most cases. Now, I recently made a video here on YouTube where I talked about an experiment I did setting up a cheap offshore company. Now, I have a lot of years of experience in being in this space and seeing the different players and seeing how they work and knowing what to expect when it comes to setting up an IBC, an offshore corporation, whatever you want to call it. But I said, I'm going to try and be as blind as possible. I'm going to go online, I'm going to find a company through a Google search. I'm going to find one of these, incorporation mills. And I'm going to choose from one of their 18 different countries that they offer companies in. Kind of like if you were to go to the dermatologist and say, hey, I've got a cancerous mole, and he said, here are 18 different ways we can remove it, why don't you choose? So I went onto the website, I found one that looked reputable. I used my knowledge of the industry to make sure that I was getting the best deal with everything that I needed, not just the best deal on company formation, but the best deal on everything. And I ended up with a Belize company. I chose a Belize company. And Belize is a jurisdiction that I would not recommend that you set up. I'm going to tell you a little bit about my experience. I'll leave that mostly for the other video, but Belize is not a place that I think that the average person should be setting up their main business. I set it up because I already have an active business. I already have companies in different places in the world. And it was not only an experiment for me, but I know how to get a couple of bank accounts for Belize. And so my Belize company, if I was ever going to use it, would be a very special purpose company with limited funds and limited assets. If you're setting up your main business in Belize, if that's your strategy for offshoring your entire business from the US or someone else, then I would encourage you to look somewhere else. And here's why. The number one reason really is that Belize, whether I like it or not, has always been viewed by the international banking community and by this community as a little bit of a rung below even some of the other offshore jurisdictions. So we live in a world now where all of the offshore jurisdictions, all of the BVIs, the Bermudas, the Caymans, the Isle of Mans, have a little bit of a taint on their image due to public perception. That's not entirely fair, and it shouldn't stop you from going offshore. What it does mean is that because of that, banks have been more scrutinous of any offshore jurisdiction, even some hybrid jurisdictions like Hong Kong. People have had a lot of trouble getting bank accounts, and I've had people in the space, people who do this for a living, coming and asking me for advice recently. So getting an account for an offshore company has become more difficult, but for Belize it's become even more difficult. And the reason really is that lack of due diligence. Now, for some people who are going offshore, and one of their reasons is, hey, I want more simplicity in my life, that may seem like a feature and not a bug. But in reality, try moving money out of Belize. You're probably going to have a higher rate of challenges moving your money out of Belize, or even out of a Belize company into your home country, into the country where you're living. Certainly you're going to have more questions asked of you. You're going to need to provide more documentation. There's going to be a lot more compliance ongoing. And so the idea that there's very little due diligence in Belize, even compared to, for example, a BVI, I think is a negative thing in a world where the world is obviously focused on transparency. The days of hiding money overseas are over. And so, if you can do a little bit more work up front, and maybe it costs a little bit more to set up in a more transparent jurisdiction, that's worthwhile. And I'm not saying anything bad about Belize. I happen to like Belize. But the reality is the reality, and I give up being a crusader and a raconteur and a petition, drive leader long ago. The reality is that there are fewer banks, there are fewer people who want to work with Belize companies and people who have Belize companies. You're also seeing laws in a couple of countries around the world that list Belize as a tax haven, to where if you even have a company there are special filing, reporting, or tax paying requirements. And that's because of that Belize reputation. Is it fairly deserved? I don't know, and I'm not going to comment on that. But when you're running an active business, selling stuff on Amazon or doing whatever else, the machinations of international finance really aren't your concern. You just want to get a company that works. Now, there are folks online who I think that they're well-intentioned who would say, well, hey, there's a hybrid structure where you can use a Belize company that's easy to manage with some kind of developed world country, and you can do transfer pricing, you can have subsidiaries, you can do this or that to keep your money in a developed country and use Belize as a sort of shield. Well, I'll tell you, I actually had someone who came to me about a month ago who said, yeah, I actually went to open a bank account for one of my related companies in the United States, and I got what I determined is Andrew to be a pretty savvy banker who realized, oh, Belize ownership, yeah, we're not so sure about that. Some bankers may not have an issue with that, but I can tell you that if Belize is part of your structure, I think that you're going to have more and more scrutiny going forward from people in the banking world who just don't want to touch Belize. And we could do a separate video on all the different challenges people have had banking there. I happen to, again, think that banking in Belize is okay for a certain purpose. But what we're seeing now is not about the Belize banks. We're seeing, I think, an increased push to say, if a Belize company is part of someone's structure, we're going to try and shut them out. That's not entirely happening right now. I'm not saying that there are lots of examples of that, but I'm saying I think that that's a trend where being in a company like a Belize is going to be more and more difficult going forward. So that's really the big piece for me. There are folks who will tell you, oh, it's so easy, you just set up Belize as kind of your flag of convenience, and then you keep everything else significant over here. And I think that that is perhaps good from one point of view. For example, if someone says from a tax point of view, maybe that works. But from my perspective as an entrepreneur, tax is merely one piece of the puzzle. Operations and having working bank accounts, being able to move money, not being bothered every 5 minutes to fill out more forms, not being questioned for every single thing you do, actually being able to maintain those bank accounts, be able to maintain merchant accounts, be able to have free flows of money. I think that's important. And the trend that I see in the world is much more scrutiny. In fact, I looked at a trend that I started to notice last summer in US banking, where they're really starting to crack down on where people are doing business. So banks and merchant account providers and everybody, I mean, if you look at the last 2, 3, 4, 5 years, I've been watching this up close and personal, they are getting a lot more scrutinous. And so to put in some kind of, fly spec, laissez-faire, corporate structure into your strategy, again, it may work for my strategy. I'm a non-US citizen. I have far less tax exposure than the average person. I have a knowledge of how this works. I have, relatively lenient rules on moving, money. So for me, Belize could work for, again, a special purpose company, holding some type of asset, for example, or holding some kind of intellectual property. But for the average person who's running an active business, I think that these offshore companies in general are overprescribed. I think that hybrid approaches are good. And so, I guess that my approach is I take umbrage with some of the folks who are saying, hey, be legitimate, use these hybrid onshore, offshore structures. I also take umbrage with the folks who just say, go offshore and we don't support you and figure out your own taxes. I think that really the future of offshore is going to be onshore. There are hybrid approaches, but I think that using companies that are already tainted, whether fairly or unfairly, is not going to be the solution, and you should strongly consider whether that's something that you really want to do. So there are a lot of things to consider here. I am not an attorney. I'm not a CPA. I'm someone who, as a business owner, has had to go through this and has had to deal with the ups and the downs of being offshore and of living a global citizen lifestyle for years. And I'm commenting merely on what I've seen being in your shoes. I think it's easy to be the lawyer, the tax dude, the incorporator, and say, hey, how easy is it? Merely by saying what should happen on paper. I'm giving you experience based on what I see as trends and what I've experienced in my time operating overseas. And I think that tax is one thing, simplicity is one thing, privacy is one thing, but operations is key. So many people have come to me and said, I set up this offshore structure and I could never figure out how to use it. Meanwhile, I just paid a lot of money in taxes because I couldn't use what I bought. That to me is the key, and I fear that Belize, for too many people, may be something that's not going to work, if not now, certainly not in the future. So if you want to find out more about these international corporate strategies, whether you want to save tax, whether you want to protect your assets, you want to just build a whole global citizen lifestyle, we've got a lot of videos here on our channel. Just click the subscribe button below. If you're looking for our most advanced strategies, if you're looking for help, you can go to our website. You can go to nomadcapitalist.com, and you'll find a lot of help and information there as well.